So I recently finished playing PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale on the PS3. It's commendable that the developers went ahead and made this game different enough from Smash Brothers so that they weren't just copying it. But to be honest, while I was playing this, I was just kind of thinking that I could be playing Smash Brothers and having a lot more fun of the time. That's not to say that the game's bad. There are some things that I like about it and a lot of things that I don't really like about it. First off, the controls. I didn't know that this was really possible, but they feel both floaty and stiff at the same time. Whenever you're moving around executing moves, it's like you're locked into each swing that you go for, but then whenever you get hit, it seems like you're up in the air for like way longer than you should be. So the controls just kind of feel weird. They're not the worst controls that I've ever experienced in a game, but they aren't that great. I'm not too big of a fan of the scoring system in this game either. In something like Super Smash Brothers, you score points by knocking your opponents off of the map. In this game, you have to charge a super meter, and there's varying levels of the super meter to give you different special moves, but in order to score points, you need to land these special moves on your opponents. The moves themselves are pretty cool. I mean, each character has 3 different ones corresponding to level 1, level 2, or level 3. Level 3 is usually like some cutscene triggering super move, and it takes the longest to get, but it's overpowered, I guess. What I find annoying about the special move scoring system is that it's relatively easy to miss your special moves if you're not using the level 3 overpowered one. And they can also be interrupted by enemy attacks, and they can be interrupted relatively easily. There were several times whenever I was trying to just quickly end a match by getting to a certain score limit, and it seemed like every time I was trying to go for my super, I was getting interrupted or I was missing, and it just didn't feel natural whenever that happened. You should be getting something for the effort that you put into charging up your super meter. The AI is pretty dumb. This is in stark contrast to the relatively good AI in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which I played before playing this. I was playing the game on regular, and the AI just kind of let you combo them. There was a bunch of different fights where I would basically just push an enemy into the corner, and I could basically bully them until I had my super meters charged up, and then I could finish them off with a super move. So they didn't really put up a whole lot of a fight. Each character has their own mini story that you can experience in their arcade mode. They're pretty neat just to experience a little bit of extra story from these franchises that you may have favorite games in, but they're not anything spectacular. There's not even like animated cutscenes. It's pretty much just a collection of drawings that they fade in between one another with VO to describe each character's motivation or why they're going in and fighting a bunch of other PlayStation characters. So it's not great, but it's enough to keep you interested in playing. There's a decent variety of characters that you can play as in PlayStation All-Stars, but there are a bunch of notable characters that just aren't in the game. You would think Crash, Spyro, Lara Croft, maybe even Alucard from Symphony of the Night. These are some big PlayStation characters that you would think would be in the game, but they just aren't there. Most of the moves in the game feel somewhat satisfying to pull off. Some characters have some weird, not lag, but they just feel a little slow when you're inputting different moves. But whenever they land, they feel satisfying, and occasionally you can get into a groove where you're juggling enemies, and that's always really satisfying to pull off in any fighter. The stages are really interesting in PlayStation All-Stars in that they basically smash together 2 different franchises. So one game series will have like the core level that you're actually fighting on, and then partway through the fight, in the background, you'll see like a giant robot from the Killzone franchise like laying waste to the area. Or you'll see characters and just other game worlds collide in the background, and it's a really neat feature. It doesn't change the level geometry in any way, but it just makes the levels really interesting to look at while you're fighting. Something that I found kind of weird is that the texture quality in the game is kind of trash. It's funny to say that for a PS3 game you have a certain expectation, especially now going backwards, but they just look not great. They look really muddy at times, and other times they just look like they're low resolution textures, and it makes the game look really budgety and not something that PlayStation would be highlighting all their franchises in it. The game's not that much of a looker. The balance is a little odd. There's definitely some characters in the game that are better to play than others, and certain characters that are more fun to play than others. Some of the characters, like Colonel Radek from Killzone, he's more of a ranged fighter, so a lot of the times the AI will just kind of sit in the corner and fire guns at you. So the balance I don't think is the greatest in this game, and it didn't really seem like they ever got around to patching any of those issues. I mentioned the boss character in the arcade mode earlier. He kind of sucks. He basically looks like a precursor to Knack and has no personality, even though he tries to make it seem like he's charismatic. It's just a giant polygon mess, and I don't even think it has a name, but yeah, it's not a very cool boss. You just end up fighting shadow versions of the other fighters that you've spent the last 15 minutes fighting. The story mode fights also just get repetitive. Pretty much each character, despite having different intro and outro cutscenes in the story and one other moment where two characters interact with each other, they are pretty much the same. They swap out the fights, but you always start by fighting one person, then you fight two people, then you go for 2 rounds fighting 3 people, then for the next 2 matches you have to get 3 kills to end the match, then it's a one-on-one, and then it's the final boss where you fight the shadow fighters. And that's for every single character, so it gets really repetitive, and you kind of wish that they would have changed it up just a little bit more. By the time that I was finishing the game, I just didn't really feel any incentive to continue with any of the other fighters, because I've done this 7, 8, 9, 10 times beforehand. The camera can act really wonky at times. It seems like it tries to favor the positioning of all players, but sometimes that means that the camera will go like too low, and then you're like looking off in weird parts of the screen and you can't really see a whole lot. So I think the camera definitely could have been tweaked a little bit more to follow the action a lot better. There's a surprising amount of costumes in the game. They are all really creative also. Like, there's a Big Daddy costume that basically textures him as a little sister's toy Big Daddy. There's different costumes for the infamous characters, Dante. They did a really good job on having a variety of costumes and making the characters look really cool. There's also some DLC in the game. I didn't buy any of it because, frankly, it's still kind of too expensive. It's like $20 for 4 characters. But there's also Isaac Clarke, Zeus from God of War. There's a guy named Emmett from Starhawk, and Kat from Gravity Rush. These characters are okay. Gravity Rush makes sense, but Zeus is just kind of like, seems like he's thrown in there, and like the Big Daddy and some of the other franchises, I didn't really think Isaac Clarke was a PlayStation representative, but he's there and he's one of the cooler DLC fighters. If I were to get any, I would get Isaac Clarke, but yeah, there's DLC if you end up picking up the game and want more fighters to fill up the roster with. The game is really cheap. I bought it for $5 at a local GameStop. So if you think that you would like to try something that's like Super Smash Bros. But with a bunch of different franchises, then I think it's definitely worth the money. The concept is always interesting. It's always fun to see franchises interact with each other, characters interact with each other, and big culmination games like this in Super Smash Bros. It's always fun to just witness it, even if it is only for 5 or 10 minutes, or even if you get like a bunch of hours out of it. I think the game is fun for the most part, but in short bursts. And yeah, I don't regret buying it or anything, but there's a lot of issues with the game and some positives. So if anything that I talked about sounds cool to you, you'll probably enjoy the game, and I'd say it's worth the $5 to pick up. So those were my thoughts on PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, you can leave a like, maybe subscribe, and check out a bunch of the other videos on the channel. See you in the next one.